White dive on him.
This is twice now the Celtics have been first to the floor. They try to save with Horford. Unbelievable.
Boston first to the floor. So good.
Brown fakes, fires up the three. Bang! Tatum dives on the floor. Everybody dives. Jaylen Brown with the flush. Blocked by Porzingis. He's doing it all. Tatum spinning, driving, layup. Washington drives. Blocked by White. Oh, what a block from Derek White.
What is up? Welcome back to another episode of First to the Floor, joined by, of course, Wayne Spooney, and a guest that people are very excited for a variety of reasons, I would say. From Hoops Tonight, Jayson Timpf. How's it going, man?
It's good to see you guys. I've enjoyed talking hoops with you, Jake, over the course of the last couple of months. I'm excited to do it in this format. And honestly, I think it's kind of piquing interest in terms of getting into the weeds about the Celtics, because it really feels like the Cavs and Thunder are their optimism is like a runaway freight train right now. And so I think it's a really interesting time to actually take a deeper look at the Celtics and what they're doing this year.
Yeah, it's funny. There was I don't know how long ago it was, 2 months. There was you commented below one of my normal agenda pushing kind of hater takes. It was this is the reason the Knicks will never win the title. And then you came below with a reasonable, I don't know, it's probably a bit early. And I was like, shit, I didn't realize that Jayson has started following me. I better respond with some real sensical basketball takes after this. But yeah, I was like,
I'm never going to judge anybody for that sort of thing, because I did that shit so much before I started working for the Volume. I was the guy that was being snarky and talking shit and doing all that kind of thing. So I never take that sort of thing personally anyway.
Yeah, it's kind of, we do a little bit of that here, right, Spoony?
No, never, man. I mean, yeah, I tweet out Anthony Edwards on-offs all the time. Yeah, sure, once in a while, but yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, but you are right. When I reached out to come on the show, I was like, it could be really good timing. The Celtics have this road trip coming up. The Cavs and the Thunder are playing. Obviously, the Celtics are playing the Thunder. Yeah, we're in a really nice, fun spot in the regular season right now. And so I guess just to start us off, the Celtics by Celtic standards over the last 18 months have slid a little bit. Is there anything to be concerned about from your perspective, Jayson? Or is this just kind of it's December, January?
So I think it goes deeper than December, January. I think it has a lot to do with just defending champion-itis, which is just a real thing. I mean, there's this phase that every team goes through in their growth where they realize they're awesome and they start to attack every single night in the regular season with a certain amount of intensity. Ironically, I think the Celtics were in this phase in the second half of 2022, where we learned, oh man, this team has this crazy defensive punch, but it was being thrown every night during that stretch. And even going into that playoff run, they were winning with defense. And that defensive ceiling has always been there for the Celtics, and I still feel very strongly that that's there to a certain extent, maybe not to the same extent as it was with Robert Williams, but it's still a very good defensive team with a very good defensive punch. But why would they throw that every single night in the regular season? All that would do is break down their bodies, right? And you see teams go through these phases, and again, the Thunder were the 1 seed last year, but they were barely the 1 seed. They kind of settled into that at the end of the year as Denver and Minnesota toasted off some games, right? This year, it's this is their first year where it's we're better than everybody. This is awesome. Let's go. We're doing group interviews. This is fun. and Cleveland's very much in the same kind of spot, right? And so I think it'd be unrealistic to expect the Celtics to keep up with that. I think that'd be unrealistic. That said, I think there are some legitimate differences. The big one that stands out to me, I was really digging into it today. The offensive rating is only down 2.4 points per 100 possessions, which is really nothing that crazy. The main difference that I'm seeing, their 3-point volume is up 7.3 attempts per game over last year. Their points in the paint is down 5.1 points per game. And then the weird one to me, they're just not shooting well this year compared to last year. So of the 8 core rotation players, 7 of them are down year over year in their 3-point percentage. Tatum's down 1.4%. Jaylen Brown's down 2.9%. Drew Holiday's down 8.6%. His corner threes haven't been nearly as reliable as years past. Derek White's even down about 0.5%. Horford's down 5.2, Hauser's down 4.7, Porzingis is down 4.6. Peyton Pritchard is the one guy who's like shooting better than he did last year. So like it's clear that they've leaned a little bit more into their shooting, which is probably a product of some settling, which is probably a product of just dealing with regular season malaise, and they're just not shooting quite as well as they did last year. But I still feel like when push comes to shove, the Celtics are still the Celtics. They've had so many super dominant wins mixed in the mediocrity. Like you could tell they just have these nights where like, all right, guys, like let's go, let's go show what we can do. And so I would be lying if I said that they're playing with a little bit of fire. Like they obviously are, because the Cavs are a very good team. I think all Celtics fans need to recalibrate how they view that roster, because Evan Mobley and Darius Garland are not the same players they were last year. They're just not. No one can guard Darius Garland now. He gets wherever he wants on the floor. It didn't used to be that way. Like Evan Mobley is like this super confident, comfortable offensive player now. Didn't used to be that way. So like, I think there's a certain amount of like the Celtics need to have an appropriate fear of these teams, but I haven't seen anything that's made me believe that 4 times in 2 weeks, one of these teams deserves to be favored over them, if that makes sense.
Do you think there's any risk to sort of not this sort of laissez-faire approach to the regular season that they've had? Because like they were on a mission last season and they kept that mission from the start of the season till the end of the playoffs. Is there any fear that maybe they're developing bad habits that might come to roost later on? Or do you think like, hey, this team's been in wars for 7-8 years now. They understand they have a switch and they can flip it?
So obviously there's a certain amount of playing with fire, just in the sense that like the way I kind of framed it in my show is like there's a certain talent gap between Boston and Cleveland. Like even though Cleveland has experienced an influx of talent through internal player development, I still feel like there's a little gap between Boston and them. Like it still is ridiculous just to think about the talent that's on this Boston roster. And like everyone's like, oh, what about Ty Jerome? He's playing really well. What about this guy coming off the bench? And it's like, Peyton Pritchard's sneaky been one of the best backup guards in the league this year. Like the Sam Hauser's not shooting the ball as well, but I still think he's a really solid bench piece. You know what I mean? And from the talent perspective, there's still a gap, but there is definitely an execution gap too, like a sharpness gap. And that gap is going to manifest in some way in a series. And one of those gaps is going to win, so to speak. So the Celtics, it's incumbent on them to close that gap. The advantage is, as scary as Cleveland suddenly looks, and again, like you guys, I guarantee you guys weren't even taking them seriously before the season. I wasn't either. Cavs fans probably shouldn't have been before the season. So like,
this.
Yeah, exactly. Like they're 32-4. Like this is crazy.
Nuts.
So I think acknowledging that is a real threat. That's a late May threat. Like the Celtics are going to be the 2 seed. So there's also this element where they're going to have a month straight to try to sharpen things up in the first couple rounds of the playoffs. And so I have a hard time believing, with the serious attitudes that they have in that locker room, and especially with Jayson Tatum just flat out being a better player this year than he was last year, I have a hard time believing that they're not going to take it seriously when the time comes.
Yeah, that was a good. The execution gap is like, that's what they've gotten so good at, which is like one of the biggest differences between like that team that made the finals in 22 and the team that won the finals last year. And like that, to me, I'm going to track it close. I haven't gone all the way back and watched all of it yet, but it's something I'm looking at now. And there's 2 plays I've got here that like speak to like maybe that's not quite there right now. 17 seconds on the shot clock in Denver. Straight to Kristaps Porzingis post up on Peyton Watson. Like he gets fouled. They actually challenged this. I don't remember if they won or lost. And I'm like, you can get to that shot whenever you want. And then there's this other play here in the Thunder game, which is like PTSD reincarnated.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
This one's bad.
The lefty drive.
It's like, okay, who's the best perimeter defender we can attack? Jalen Williams, I'd like to choose you. I'm going to look directly into the face of the nail help as well, by the way. Lose the ball a little bit, get stonewalled. And like, all things considered, not the worst shot in the world, but like the Celtics just couldn't, like they needed to hit one of those, like they just could not hit any of those. And those 2 examples, like they're not, huge things, but like you can get to a Peyton Watson post up. That's probably like after DeAndre Jordan, the next best one. You can probably win that sometimes, but like 17 seconds on the shot clock, it's the difference between a good shot and a great shot. And that was like their mantra all year. Last year was like, we're hunting great shots, and that seems to have slipped a little bit. And the Jalen stuff, like we saw a little bit of evil Jalen, is what we call him.
A little bit.
in both that game and the Denver game.
Yeah.
He's had some moments this year where he's had some like truly awful shifts that I've watched, but like as I'm watching it, it literally looks like Jaylen Brown's playing a pickup game while everyone else is playing NBA basketball. So like that's the kind of stuff that you grow to expect from a team that has supreme confidence to a certain extent. I dug into some of the numbers on their shot creation because I was like, okay, like are they settling more? Like are they not generating as many quality shots as they used to? And there's some legitimacy there. So for instance, they're generating about one additional unguarded catch and shoot shot per game, despite attempting 7 more threes. So what that tells you is they're increasing their 3-point volume just for poops and giggles, not by actually like generating higher quality threes. They're settling a little bit. The points in the paint being down is an example, but their play type stuff, their ball screens, they're about 2% more frequent. They're on 30% of possessions instead of 28% of possessions last year. The efficiency is down a little bit. That probably has a lot to do with shooting, but like their post up stuff and their ISO stuff is still every bit as good, if not better. Their ISOs are up 6 points per 100 possessions over last year, with a tiny uptick in frequency. So like you would text me privately, Jake, about them not being as successful attacking matchups. In my experience watching them, the eye test wasn't telling me there was any issue on that front other than the occasional settle, which is just a product of all the stuff that we've been talking about. But again, everything just comes down to them just not shooting the ball quite as well and settling a little bit, which is so typical. Like it's so typical. And like, again, this is an Eastern Conference that up until probably a couple of weeks ago, Boston just wasn't scared of anybody. And so like when you're facing 6 months of basketball in the grind and everything associated with it, like it just wouldn't make sense for them to be super locked in all the time. So like I'm having a really hard time even coming up with a case for why I should be concerned.
Yeah, it's interesting, the ISOs being better or more efficient. I think it's just exclusively Jayson Tatum, who is like a complete ISO monster this season. I believe I just got cut off from Synergy yesterday because they're getting rid of all the fan ones. So, but NBA.com, if you filter by at least 3 isolation possessions a game, he's at 1.2 points per possession, leads the league. Zach LaVine's second at 1.12. So it's like a massive gap. Is there any concern there? Is there any like potential regression you think there? I mean, Tatum has turned himself into an ISO monster, but they're relying on it a ton this year, which I think goes back to what Jake was saying about sort of the lax execution, because you can get a Tatum ISO whenever the hell you want at any point.
It's one of the most efficient plays in the NBA right now. Have you looked at Jaylen Brown's post-ups?
I actually just wrote about it.
He's up over 1.4 points per possession. I was checking that today. I was like, good God. I was like, that's somehow better. That's somehow better than Porzingis was last year. You know, like And the big thing that Jaylen's just gotten so good at seal positioning, and like he's not even relying on the fadeaway so much. He'll just get good position and create a passing angle and get a layup on a post up. Like he's just absolutely bludgeoning teams. I also think too, like we got to acknowledge, I think that Boston has been a little bit on the conservatives. Have you guys done any sort of digging into like games missed yet to this point?
We're significantly less healthy than last year. I mean, the Porzingis obviously is like the big one, but like Jalen's missed way more, Howes has missed way more, everyone's missed more basically.
Exactly. That was the other thing I was going to say is like on based on the eye test, I just feel like when I'm checking in on Celtics games, I'm just seeing a lot of like lineups that I would never in a million years see when push comes to shove too. So like I think that plays a role as well. But in terms of like the actual stuff that I'm seeing from Jaylen and Jayson, I feel like they're better than they were last year as matchup creators. And or matchup hunters. And that really is the big thing as we look at like kind of the big picture. There's this feeling that there's slippage when it comes to a championship team that doesn't perform as well in the next regular season. And there's definitely some stuff there in terms of sloppiness that you can play with fire and get yourself beat. We've seen that happen before. That said, I also think there's something to be said about the confidence, the lack of pressure. Like there was pressure on that Celtics team last year. They were never threatened, but like Had they gotten down 3-2 in a series, can you imagine the amount of pressure that would have been on that team?
Thank God, dude. I was already losing my mind and we didn't like sweat for a single second.
Exactly. Like that. And that's the thing is like, I don't want to sit here and act like it wouldn't be a catastrophe if Boston didn't win this year. Of course it would be. There would be a lot of, I guarantee you 29 fan bases would jump all over you guys if that happened. But the pressure is less because they are champions now. And you can literally see it in the way they carry themselves. There's a certain looseness, a certain confidence. And again, with Jayson, I thought last year in the postseason, Jayson Tatum did a wonderful job of kind of like not forcing it through his slump. Like he did pass the reins on nights when he didn't have it. He was willing to take a more of a support role as a shot creator than just a heliocentric, let me determine everything kind of role. And in a weird way, that's the kind of thing that's made him perfect for this team, is like his willingness to kind of like evolve and be all these different things. But like he impacted winning with his versatility last year in the postseason. I think he's going to impact winning more as just an alpha dog shot creator this year. And that to me is like a thing that can lift this team to an even higher ceiling than we all had originally anticipated. And frankly, I'm excited to watch Jayson in this postseason. I think he's going to crush it.
Yeah, I think this is going to be the season where he kind of takes that mantle as like the playoff performer, as the top 5 guy he's become this year. He's going to do it in the regular season. Like just one on the ISO thing, because it reminded me, Commissioner Impossible from the Discord did like a deep dive on Tatum ISOs, and like it's very long. So if you're in the Discord, like look it up. But there's one stat at the end of his little post. Only one player has scored more ISO points per possession than JT over the last 10 seasons with a minimum 200 possessions. It's 17-18 James Harden at 1.22 points per possession. So it's like he's having a crazy, crazy season. Shout out Rodrigo Vieira for the $10. I'm assuming that's like $1,000 Australian dollars, which is awesome news for me. So that's great news. The volume with Tatum is crazy too. And I checked the numbers today, and I was like, he's already got that many this year. Because like, so when I'm at the end of the year and I do my high volume lists, for me it's 1,000 pick and rolls, 250 ISOs, 250 post ups. That's what I look at as like the high volume. Like Tatum might get to 500 ISOs this year. Like he's super insane volume. It's crazy.
He's at 207 per NBA.com right now, which is absolutely nuts.
He keeps getting better. It's one of our favorite things about him. But so looking at like the Cavs, Celtics, Thunder thing. So I was listening to your pod. I think it's totally accurate and fair to have all 3 in the same tier as contenders. How are you ordering them? I do think there's like a little rock, paper, scissors thing developing here, because which kind of reflected in the betting odds. Like the Cavs are still 10-1 and the Thunder and Celtics are kind of even to win the title now. And I think it's because I think the Celtics match up better with Cleveland. I think Cleveland matches up better with OKC, as we saw with the size and kind of in the Milwaukee game. And then the Thunder, they remind me of the Miami teams that gave the Celtics trouble, but like with real like high-end talent.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a great way to put it, because like I thought the same thing. Like specifically coming into this season, the reason why we all looked at the Thunder as the one team who could potentially go at Boston was their specific ability to be switchable and contain the ball. And that really was the thing. If you looked at that second half in OKC, they generated 3 unguarded catch and shoot jump shots, 3 total in the entire second half. And like the paint touches too, they had like 34 points in the paint in the first half and only 6 in the second half. A lot of possessions like that Jaylen Brown one you'd show where like they just didn't even get the ball in past the first layer of the defense. And so Oklahoma City is uniquely capable of matching up on the perimeter with Boston. The problem with Oklahoma City with respect to a team like Cleveland is just so much better shooting the basketball. And that, like it's so funny. I've always thought about these like playoff teams more in the scope of their weaknesses than their strengths. Because like a strength might be there one night or not the next. It's like, oh, we hit shots tonight, or this guy had a great game, but he didn't the next game, or whatever it is. Your weakness is there every night. Like whatever it is that is your problem, it tends to be something that manifests. And like when I look at all the units and I look at OKC's defense, OKC's offense, Cleveland's defense and offense, Boston's Cleveland and offense and defense. The unit that I trust the least is Oklahoma City's offense of all of those 6 units.
Yep.
I've just seen them legitimately decompose too many times this year. to where like they just don't know what to do. And a lot of them, I've said this a bunch on my show, but they kind of remind me a little bit of the Celtics a couple years ago, where there's the execution gap in terms of their offensive decision making relative to what they can be. Like that Boston team, I'm sure it drove you guys crazy to watch Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum like try to shoot through Brook Lopez. It's like, he's a tree. This isn't gonna work. Like, swing it to the corner, it will play out of it. You know what I mean?
Clear out. I'm gonna ISO on Bam. I can.
Yeah, I bet I could take Draymond. Yeah.
Why, dude? Oh my God.
Exactly. So like I as I look at those groups, I think Cleveland's shooting is much more reliable. The way they shot against Oklahoma City was crazy. They only generated 7 unguarded catch and shoots last night against the Thunder, but they just kept knocking them down. But that's the thing. Like Max Strus, lightning quick release, doesn't need much space. Dean Wade, 6'10", he can get it off over the top. I'm not sure if he's quite that tall, but he's big. He can shoot over the top. Like they have contested. They have playoff jump shooters. But then they also have guys that can get the defense into rotation. So, like, I trust Cleveland's units more than I trust Oklahoma City's units. I kind of feel like Cleveland, it's the team where it's like their offense could just chew everybody up and spit them out. Like, that 129 on OKC last night was the most anybody scored against OKC all season. Like, that's their thing. Oklahoma City, it's the defense. You hold Boston to 27 in the second half. That's crazy. With Boston, it's all about the experience and the veteran talent. Like, everything about NBA history tells us the guys that have been there and done that are just more dependable in those settings. And so that to me is like the major optimism in that scope, is like they're very versatile on both ends of the floor. They have all this talent, but it's all experienced talent, veteran talent. They're not going to get rattled. Like Tatum, maybe it didn't happen last year, but those guys have been through plenty of adversity. You know, they've been in plenty of spots where their backs were against the wall. And so like I just trust them more in terms of their overall experience. I'd go Boston, then Cleveland, then OKC, but the difference between all three of them for me is mostly negligible at this point.
Yeah, you kind of hit on this. Our next question in the run sheet is actually about the weaknesses of each team, and essentially like if this team loses in the playoffs, what do you think the reason why is? Like after the series, we're like, well, their blank just wasn't good enough, or this lineup got exploited, or they couldn't play this guy who's important for them.
So OKC, we talked about the offense, and I think that's the big one. And I there's no like Chet coming back's not going to suddenly fix that either. Like to me, their offense is like they'll have games in the postseason where they look great, and they'll have games where they completely fall apart and lose. Cleveland, I still have some concerns about specific elements of their defensive personnel. So like entry points, but also defensive rebounding. They're a bottom 10 defensive rebound percentage team this year. And they lost a series 2 years ago to the Knicks because they couldn't box out Mitchell Robinson, you know? So like they could run into like, what if they got into a weird series with Philly in the first round and Embiid just shoot them up on the inside? I think Cleveland would run Philly off the floor, but like, you get my point. It's like they have some weaknesses in terms of their defensive rebounding and entry point, like getting Georges Niang in action, getting Darius Garland in action. And even the game that Boston lost in Cleveland, I thought Tatum really did a good job like he got 2 wide open threes for Al Horford in the corners that he happened to miss. And then that layup against Darius Garland, that's a shot he's going to make 95 out of 100 times probably. So like the process of attacking Darius Garland for Boston has still resulted in good shots just about every time. And so I still think like when it comes down to that chess match piece, that's something that teams will look to attack with Cleveland. With Boston, it's just a little bit of malaise, shot selection, settling, going cold, that sort of thing. Like not being the defensive ceiling that they're capable of being because they were sloppy all season, and then they get into the postseason, they just make too many mistakes. And then just settling for a few too many threes, going cold, and botching a big game in a big spot. But like, again, anything can happen to any of these teams. And there's a specific reason why this stuff is so hard to predict, because so much can change between now and May. And then also in a series, like what if you get into a series and Dean Wade shoots 65% from three, but Sam Hauser shoots
not again, dude. We've already did the Caleb Martin thing. We already did the Caleb Martin thing.
And Dean Wade last year.
And Dean Wade did do it to us too. But like,
that's the point.
Yeah. Yes.
It can happen. You don't know what's going to happen.
Yes. And then like when the talent, like that Celtics team that lost to Caleb Martin, that was not anywhere close to the level of the team that like they could withstand that type of shooting variance in the year later, but they weren't in the year previous. But this Cleveland team has the talent, plus they obviously have that capability as well. I'm holding on to this. Like, are Cleveland like shooting merchants is probably strong, but goddamn, dude, like every single night they are at 41%.
At
and
some
it is
point, yeah.
insane. Meanwhile, the Celtics are experiencing like shooting variance Armageddon, like fucking like 15
night.
last 15 games. That's what are we now? We're 15th in the NBA in 3-point percentage. Obviously, we're shooting a shitload, but like I'm like on my knees begging for Jaylen Brown to like make a 3-point shot at this point. Like we couldn't get anything to go in that OKC series, but like the one in that game, but the one play that stands out, Tatum like hits the gas, gets to the rim, finds a pass to the corner, swing to Jaylen Brown, top of the. It's like not even barely touches the rim. It's just like, and that's the kind of place we're in from a shooting perspective right now. But then you flip it to Cleveland, it's like Karis LeVert's at 44.5%, and like he's a career 35% 3-point shooter. Or Koro's at 49%, 36%. Garland 43 versus 38. Even Mitchell 41 versus 37. And I get it. And I mean, Mobley's 40%
As a team,
now too.
they're shooting 45% on transition threes.
It's
That's
insane.
insane.
That's nuts.
You're sprinting into threes and knocking down half of them. I'm with you. There's a huge part of me that's like, what if they just don't shoot this well when they get to the postseason? But like, it's such a difficult thing to discuss with Cavs fans because they're like, it's completely theoretical. It's like, there's only one way to find out. Let's shoot them in May and let's see what happens. You know, like, look, you're either going to make them or you won't. And if you make them, you're probably going to win. And if you miss them, you're probably going to get your butt kicked. So it's like that's the thing. But I will say, again, like we talked about earlier, specifically, their spot up guys have thrived under contests this year, which speaks to a certain amount of like translatability to the postseason. I think Boston's going to have to straight up beat Cleveland. I don't think they're going to pee down their leg and lose on their own. Like I think Boston's going to have to beat them. I think they're going to have to earn it.
Spoons, let's hit an ad read.
Sure.
And do you want me to go first?
Yeah,
Sorry,
it's up
Jason,
to
we
you,
gotta
man.
pay some bills here.
You're
real
good,
quick.
man.
Yeah,
You're
I'm
good.
ready
There's
to
gotta
go if you want me to just rip game time.
Yeah, go for it, brother.
All right, let me start it up here. Okay, game time. There's nothing better than playoff football, getting to see the best players in gridiron history like John Kitna and Andy Dalton, huck it and chuck it to see the best team in the NFL is. Unfortunately, that answer is probably the Chiefs, but that doesn't make playoff games any less fun. There's no better way to grab tickets to a football game or any event than Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. WVU basketball lost a tough one to Arizona, got blown out at home, but hey, still 11-3, monster game this weekend. Number 3, Iowa State in Morgantown, and the best way to get there or any game is Game Time. You just hop on the app, search for the game or team you're looking for, super easier, and then you're shown all the available tickets and all the best deals right on your phone. Their curated deals make it even easier to find the best seats at the best prices, and maybe my favorite feature is the seat view. It'll show exactly what it looks like from any seat before you buy. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time.
Beautiful work, Spoonie. Live.
Thank you.
All right, Jason, we've wined you and we've dined you at this point. It's
Yeah. Now for the hard-hitting stuff.
exactly. So this is what I'm going to call this segment Tatum sensitivity training. I think is probably like what this segment's going to be. So we do a Celtics podcast. Like obviously, you know, we love our guy. Like all the Celtics fans, we are going to take criticism more for our guys than other guys. And you do a national show. You're gonna get it from every angle. I'm sure every team and players, fans thinks that you hate them. But do you think that Tatum fans, stands, I guess, are a little more sensitive than maybe some other groups of individuals?
Sensitive is probably the wrong word. I think Boston's just an awesome sports city, man. And your fans are insanely passionate, and I think that's awesome. Like, I didn't grow up in a sports city. I grew up in Tucson. We're big Arizona Wildcats fans here. Sorry for the loss. That was delivered.
Brutal. Yeah. Hey, we got you guys in the Bahamas.
Ronnie James, come to town. So anyway, in general, like I've always wanted. I think it would have been so cool to grow up in a city like Boston and just to be in a place where sports matter as much as it does there. it's the similar sentiment I get around the league. Like every Bucks fans like, how dare you think Jokic is better? Doesn't play any defense or this or that. Or like Thunder fans telling me this morning in my comments that I hate the Thunder just because I'm covering the Cavs win. So obviously I'm going to talk about the Cavs and how they won, So I think it's just loud. It's a little louder, maybe a tiny bit more of that Boston aggression, so to speak, but nothing that I think is out of bounds in terms of like the typical stuff you expect in this space. And I think part of the issue too is like, it's really difficult to have these conversations when there are all these shifting factors around, right? Like Tatum is playing the best basketball of his career, but he's also on the most talented roster in the league. And so all these people point to the roster and they go, this situation's easier, all these sorts of things. And by the way, those are not wrong things to point out. Like, I'm sorry, I don't think Tatum materially improves that Timberwolves roster. Like that Timberwolves roster is really tough, man. Like it's not Jared Allen and Max Strus. It's Rudy Gobert who can't catch and finish anything, and Jaden McDaniels who can't hit the side of the barn. So like there's the point being like those are worthwhile points, but that's separate from the fact that Tatum's also an awesome basketball player who's playing the best basketball in his career. And so I think part of the issue, and I think this is what causes the disconnect, is arguing up versus arguing down. Like, if I have a mailbag question that goes, why do you think Shai's better than Tatum? I'm not going to open up that take by talking about how amazing Tatum is. I'm going to explain why I think he's beneath Shai, right? So I'm pointing out negative things, right? And then Celtics fans are always arguing Tatum up, so they're always pointing out these more positive things. And so it turns into this like screaming match when the reality is all of it is true. All of it's true. And so that's the thing. Like, I do think that Shai is a little better of a surgical shot creator than Tatum is. That said, Tatum's versatility, especially on the defensive end, is far greater than Shai. And so like, it just depends on what we're talking about. And I think a lot of times Celtics fans kind of like zero in on the things that I say negatively about Tatum, which is weird because I literally spend hours and hours on my show, even before any of this, even going back to, I talked all the time last year about how Tatum guarding centers like unlocked their defensive strategy that broke most of these teams. Like I talked about all these things, just people hyper-focused on the negativity, which I totally understand. That's the social media game. But the truth of the matter is I don't dislike Tatum. I viewed him slightly lesser than Celtics fans did. Now I don't. Tatum's gotten better. Now I'm kind of on board. You know what I mean? So like it's one of those things where like I think there's just always a lot more nuance than gets brought in these discussions.
Spinny, you jump in here.
So we were going to bring up your preseason rankings, right? Because I will say, like, you are not the type of analyst who is like Kendricks Perkinsing his points and just like, I just feel like he's weak or soft. Like, you bring stats, you bring legitimate analysis to your points. But you had Tatum 7th behind AD and Ant. You've moved him up to 5th. So like the Ant Tatum convo, I am of the position that I think Anthony Edwards being extremely likable does give it almost like you resolve ties in his favor because you want him to be a little bit better than maybe he is. So can you just walk us through the reasoning on why at that point you had Ant over Tatum? And I know we've talked about how Tatum's gotten better a lot this year, but sort of what you saw at that point in time to rank him above JT.
So I thought Ant was mostly awesome in that postseason run.
He was, yeah.
What happened in that Dallas series had almost nothing to do with Ant, in my opinion, which was, this is a consistent thing that would happen to Minnesota, even if it wasn't Dallas. Jokic can't protect the rim. Nurkic can't protect the rim. So even though he was going into like a sea of bodies, he was just able to kind of slalom through all of that to get to wherever he wanted. And Phoenix's perimeter players were just completely outmatched. Like there were some possessions of Bradley Beal guarding Ant where Ant looks like just completely dusting him all over the place.
Like Jordan.
So
yeah.
Exactly. And so the what happened in that Dallas series was someone finally was like, hey, Jaden and Rudy can't do anything. Let's just load up and make this dude take a bunch of contested threes. Hell, we can even bring our big way up to the level of the screen and basically just make Ant get rid of the basketball. And it goes deeper even than personnel. Like Minnesota's just not really good with their spacing principles or their organization, off ball player movement, that sort of thing. I think we underrate the players' role in that, and we focus so much on coaching. Like smart basketball players are good at spacing. That's an important detail too. Like smart basketball players just naturally kind of know how to feed into different spots on the floor while dribble drives are happening, post-ups, things along those lines. So I thought Dallas exposed but the Wolves. Ant obviously has weaknesses that he needs to get better at. That's something that needs to be pointed out. But like he was 28, 7-7 on 60% true shooting for a Western Conference Finals team, eliminated the defending champ, like straight up alpha dogged Kevin Durant and Devin Booker in a playoff series. Like Ant was riding high at the time that I made that video, and Tatum was again having a poor shooting jump shooting postseason while also doing a lot of other good for a freakishly talented team that was dog walking a bunch of inferior teams. Okay. And so at that point in time, the way I had my rankings too, I had 1 through 4 was a tier, right? Jokic 1, and then I had Shai, Luka, and Giannis. I said multiple times during the rankings that I viewed the difference between 5 and 11 as negligible. I had Embiid at 11. You could easily make the case Embiid is 5, right? I had all those guys kind of very close to each other. My case for Ant specifically over Tatum was the combination of the elite first step that no one can guard. And I was a big believer in his jump shot. I think I've been proven right to this point that that he's one of the best jump shooters in the league. In his last 3 games, he's on 13 attempts per game. He shot like 59% or something crazy like that. Like he's a lights out jump shooter. And so I was looking at it like there were these obvious weaknesses, playmaking weakness. I think the playmaking weaknesses is overblown compared to his defensive stuff. Like he's such a young player off the ball on defense. Just immediately when he thinks he's out of the picture, he stands upright, stops paying attention. And he'll lose shooters off the ball and that sort of thing all the time. Doesn't navigate screens unless he's like feeling up for it. Like he'll just die. Like he got torched by Kyrie in that Western Conference Finals series early on because he just didn't want to fight through a screen. Like that was the main thing that was killing him there. And so like there were these obvious weaknesses, but I was just such a huge believer in his upside. And again, the Tatum at that point to me was just a Swiss Army knife, a guy that was pretty good at everything, but not great at anything. What Tatum has done this year is he's become like the jump shooter that he was earlier in his career, in addition to the Swiss Army knife that he has been later in his career. And I think it extends deeper than even some of the efficiency and box score stuff. Like, I just think Tatum is more confident and comfortable surgically dissecting defenses in the half court than he's ever been. And because now he's getting that pull-up jump shot to the point where he's comfortably over a point per shot, when that used to be a shot that defenses were like okay with conceding, now it's becoming something that's breaking defensive schemes as well. And so, again, like Ant was riding high. Tatum was obviously contributing, but not like crazy top tier superstar contributing to a championship run. And so that was with the mind frame that I was in at that point. When we did our rankings, I was just giving Ant a very, very slight edge. I also said throughout that, though, that I expected Tatum to have a big bounce back season. And I think he has. And like, I think that's the kind of stuff that gets lost in it too, is like, I'm actually a big believer in Tatum in terms of the player he's going to be and has become, if that makes sense.
It's funny because I actually think there's a lot of parallels between Ant and Tatum in that, like, in a perfect world, I don't think Tatum was supposed to maybe be the like lead creator initiator. And he kind of just had to be. Like, it was supposed to be Kyrie. He was gone. Kemba's knees turned into soup. Marcus Smart was never really going to be the guy because he couldn't shoot. It was like Tatum had to be that guy. And you saw it in the bubble was really the first time where he took like that real leap where the team was. And it's important to remember that Jalen didn't really ever get close to the version that we saw in last year's playoffs. That's been his peak, was that run. Yeah. There's been plethora of other times where like you cannot trust him with the ball in his hands in the playoffs. Tatum had to be that guy in that playoff run, and he was really young then. Like that was his age 21 season going against that Toronto Raptors defense with OG and Siakam and like Kyle Lowry. Like that was like ferocious. And then Spo the next year. Then you lose out, and then you lose. You didn't have Al Horford at that point either. The next season you come back, and the roster is like, I think it's similar to Ant's roster. In like, I actually think this roster is worse. And also the parallel between the two, Ant and Tatum. Both fan bases wish that they'd go downhill more and that they rely on their jump shots. And like Ant's because like the athleticism, Tatum's like, dude, you're 6'9", please go downhill. But this roster in the 20/21 season coming off the bubble, it was Jalen Smart, no knees Kemba, Brad Wanamaker, Tristan Thompson, Daniel Tice, where they're starting front court to start. Rookie Peyton Pritchard, Grant Williams, Semi Ojeleye, Evan Fournier, Jeff Teague, Rob Williams was figuring it out. Like Taco Fall, Jabari Parker, Tremont Waters, Carson Edwards. Like it was a shit show of a team, and Tatum got long COVID in the middle of it, and they were 10th in offensive rating that season. So like for Celtics fans, and then the next year you have that 21-22 season where he has that insane run. So I think that he actually could improve the Minnesota context like up quite a bit. Even last season, the Minnesota, they were 18th in offense. You had Cat last year, who's propelled the Knicks to the second overall offense. Obviously, the Knicks have much better everything as far as offensive personnel goes. I think Celtics fans are confident that like Tatum can impact an offense in a way that Ant hasn't been able to figure out yet. And I think that's what we would point to is like he did it with Tristan Thompson and Daniel Tice as his starting front court for like half a season.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's difficult to quantify is there is like a level of playmaker that Tatum is that Ant obviously is not. But at the same time, he's in an ecosystem where easy reads don't exist. At least not easy reads that lead to obvious payoff shots. You know, it's more like, oh, Jaden's open again, I got to throw it. You know, it's like that kind of thing. And it like, I do believe that if we put Ant in a theoretical drive and kick system with better spacing, that his simple ability to just beat people off the dribble would manifest in more playmaking opportunity. For the record, he averaged 7 assists in that postseason run. Like he's a little bit better at that than I think people give him credit for. I just flat out agree with you that Tatum is a smarter half-court offensive player. One of the things that always had me lower on Tatum compared to others was his first step, or lack thereof. I don't think he has a super elite first step. But one of the things that's really stood out to me this year that I think is really impressive is how he's gotten so good at beating people off the dribble anyway. And it's a lot of body angles and physical leverage. And it starts on two fronts. One is the pull-up jump shot. His face-up jumper off of a jab step, triple threat kind of situation, or his off-the-dribble jump shooting has reached a point where players are having to press up on him now more. And he's got like this wicked spin move off of a live dribble. Mm-hmm. Not like the I'm already downhill and I'm pounding into a spin like Pascal Siakam. I mean like the I'm in a hesitation dribble 27 feet from the basket and this dude's overplaying my left hand. I'm just going to whip into a spin back over my left shoulder and get downhill. Or like in those triple threats, like sticking that jab step foot out and then using this arm and shoulder to get that little extra bit of angle to get downhill, or using post position on inside seals on ball screens with Derek White to force paint touches through post position. Like he's gotten so good at breaking down the defense without having to be like Ant. I'm just going to like Ant will just like hit the jets and just go around people like that. That's the thing that's his like superstar ability. Right. And so in a lot of ways, like Tatum's jump shot improving and just him becoming a smarter basketball player in terms of weaponizing his body in terms of physical leverage has allowed him to kind of compensate for some of the things that I perceived as weaknesses in his past.
His handle has gotten ridiculous at 6'9" too. Like it is so tight, and he has some pretty advanced dribble moves, like that spin move included. I will say one thing, and Jason, you've watched a lot more Anthony Edwards than I have. I guarantee that. When I watch Ant, to me, Tatum is a lot less selfish off the ball in that he's a lot more willing to cut. He's a lot more willing to set really good, hard screens. He's a lot more willing to just kind of serve as the decoy. And I think that's something Ant can absolutely learn. But to me, that's something that sets Tatum apart from him as well.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, like, let's just be honest about Ant. Ant right now is all vibes and talent. Like there's not a whole lot of like refined basketball player going on there. But for the record, that's why I love him so much and why I'm so excited about the player that he can be. Like I look at that and I go like, dude, when this kid's 27, he's going to be so much fun. You know, and to your point, and like I get it. Like I think Wayne, I think the way you put it at the beginning is right. Like tie goes to Ant. Like that's basically what it was for me. And that's the thing. Like
for everyone.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. And I think, and by the way, I think that's part of it. Like, it wasn't just me. I think there was kind of a national sentiment kind of building around that. And I think that led to the natural pushback, but like, there's no doubt that Ant is severely lacking in refinement as a basketball player. Even like a lot of the shots that again, like those 2 shots that he hit to beat the Clippers, they're not good shots. They're contested step back threes from 27 feet. It's just like he's so damn crazy athletic that he can get the separation and lift necessary to knock them down, right? So like again, there's that refining's not there. And by the way, again, when like at the time, like Tatum didn't seem to have this like top end offensive ability that he's clearly demonstrated this year. I also had some discouragement, and I wonder if you guys saw this too. Tatum was working on that pull-up jump shot for years and it wasn't working. Years. Like he came into the league as this really good jump shooter. Like if you go back, he had a season, I want to say it was 2018 or 19, where he was up over
1920.
Yeah, where he was up over one.
Bubble.
Yeah, 1920. Yeah, he was
pre-bubble shutdown, baby.
He was up over 1.1 points per jump shot. That's like elite jump shooting in this league, and he's been hovering right around 1 point for jump shot for the last few years. And this year he's back up at like 1.07 or 1.06, something like that. And his pull-up jump shooting is up over. This is the first time he's been up over a point per pull-up jump shot for this large of a sample size since the bubble year. So like again, like it just. There was like a kind of a confluence of things. Like Tatum was always the more refined basketball player. The like that was always there. It just felt like the top end wasn't there, and now that top end has come back in the sense that like he has combined the 2 best versions of himself into this player that is now looking like one of the 5 best players in the league.
There are some people out there that think the Lakers started COVID as a way to shut down the league so Tatum would go cold for the next 4 years. I'm not one of those people.
Can I toss out a
Definitely
10-second Lakers propaganda? 10 seconds.
Please.
Okay?
Yeah.
Like everyone
Cut
talks
the mic.
Ben.
Everyone talks about that Lakers team being lucky. They were 24-3 to start the year. They were the Cavs from this year. No one would consider
it was all Rondo.
Yeah, it was all Rondo. But I think that's funny. But anyway, I'm done with
Yeah, no.
They were really good. Yeah.
They were really good. We didn't have to do a whole bubble thing, but they were really good. And it's probably for the best the Celtics didn't make the finals against the Heat in that season too, so we wouldn't have lost to the Lakers as well. But so that intangible thing, I think, is something that like Tatum that I've learned. Like having Jalen and Jayson as our superstars has been something that we've learned is not something like you can guarantee for guys. And like whether it's just your life, like normal people experience this too, like no matter the industry, right? There's just like people that are way more talented, and there are people that work harder. And like Tatum is going to max out whatever it is that the ceiling is. And I'm not sure that's the case for Ant, and we'll kind of move this into like Luka, because like I'm not sure if you have Tatum up in that tier with those other guys. On this show, we kind of have like Jokic is tier 1 alone. Then we have Giannis, Shai, Tatum. Am I missing someone? Luka. That's like in their own tier and then below. And so I'm not sure if you've moved Tatum into join those guys, but like that intangible stuff with Tatum is something that like when you're going into a season, you're trying to build a team around. Like, we know that he's going to play whatever role you ask of him. He's going to do the dirty work. Like he's the reason that the Celtics, like Al Horford's inability to defensive rebound for the past 3 years hasn't really been a problem. Is because Tatum's just like, I'll do it, I guess. We don't, and so like, and that's just true in every facet of the game that we see, and like adding strength, fixing his jump shot, whatever the weaknesses are, he's going to try his best to fix those things.
So I agree with you. I think Tatum is absolutely the guy that's going to max out his talent. And that's what's crazy. We've always made jokes about Tatum being young. He's still pretty young. I remember the basketball player that I became in my early 30s, and I can't even imagine what that's good. Like, I was so much better than I was in my 20s. So like, I just can't even imagine for a player with his kind of talent. And like, I think it's a pretty safe bet that he's going to be one of the best shot makers in the league when he's in his early 30s, because he just works too hard at it to not eventually be really good at it. Like, it's just clearly something that he's emphasizing behind the scenes with Drew, right? So like, as far as the top tier goes, I can't like tweak that based on regular season stuff. Like, I would obviously just wait until after we got a playoff run. I thought Luka embarrassed himself in the finals last year. Like, it was legitimately the worst defensive performance from an individual player I've ever seen. And it called into question some of my theories, because like, there's a very specific reason why I have Jokic over Giannis, and there's a very specific reason why I have Shai and Luka over Tatum, and it's offensive surgery. I think that is the hardest thing to do in the NBA. And when you get to roster building, I kind of feel like it's easier to build a coherent defense around good supporting talent, and then to give a offensive-minded star a role within that he can fill, then this freakishly talented offensive star can carry an offense, right? Kind of like the best example, ironically, is the Luka team that went to the Western Conference Finals. It's like Jalen Brunson, but a lesser version of him. It's like Dorian Finney-Smith. It's Frank Ntilikina, Josh Green. It's just this Dwight Powell, Maxi Kleber. It's like just a bunch of guys that he took to the conference finals because he's a surgical half-court offensive player. But the whole principle of that hangs on, can you build a coherent defense around him? And Mavs fans have been in my mentions so much, like, did you see our defensive rating against Boston? And it's like, yeah, I did, but you couldn't get stops when you needed to. And there were like these hemorrhage runs where like,
I have eyes, dude.
Yeah. Like there were, I had to point it out to these guys. I had to be like, second half of this game, you gave up a 145 offensive rating. First half of game 5, while you guys were losing the series, you gave up a 140 something offensive rating. Like every time Boston needed to build distance, they put Luka in action, toasted him off the dribble, played drive and kick, got great shots and beat him. And it cost them the series. Like straight up. The reason why Dallas got blown out was they Luka could not solve Boston's defense, but Boston was able to attack him every single time down the floor that they wanted to, at least. And so that's called into question some of my approach there to a certain extent. Like, yes, you can be an offensive surgical player, but you've got to be like Jokic. You have to be able to fill a defensive role that is at least not so exploitable the way that Luka was. And so if Tatum goes through and has that type of, A-class top tier superstar run, and Luka once again loses a playoff series and is getting cooked on defense, like that would be a big indicator for me. Shai, I think there's some Shai in the Bucks game, and then also in that Cavs game a little bit, especially in the first half. I'm like, dude, why are you just dribbling up the floor and taking impossible shots every single time? Like there's a certain thing with Shai where he can kind of try to beat his head into the wall instead of taking stuff that the defense is giving him. And so that's something he'll have to solve when he gets to the to later rounds this year. But again, if I change it, it'll be in the postseason. But yeah, like there used to be a time where I would never put Tatum over Luka and Shai, but like what happened in the finals last year caused me to kind of reevaluate my worldview to a certain extent.
To your point on going at Luka, Tatum averaged 9 drives a game in the regular season. He averaged 19 in the finals, and
That's
I bet
a crazy stat.
80% of them were against Luka Doncic. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's a crazy stat. I haven't heard that. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy that he didn't need to make shots in order to like get the offense working for the Celtics. So yeah, obviously there's that defensive flaw for Luka is what Celtics fans like can't wrap their head around when you talk about comparing those two guys, because it's just like, I understand like half court surgical like when it comes to Luka is like otherworldly. Tatum has closed that gap, especially this season. And I think that's totally fair to wait till the playoffs because, like, all of this doesn't, like, none of the Cavs, it's really cool you guys are 31 and or whatever, a million and few, and the Thunder, let's see you guys get out of the second round. All this stuff is like, whatever, the playoffs is where it matters, which is why Celtics fans, it's like, why does that not apply to us? Like, we have the proof of concept when it comes to Tatum, where it's like, yes, the rosters have been pretty good, but like, best player on either two conference finals, two finals, or a chip team. Like, he just gives you such a high floor when it comes to game planning and executing in a series. It's like, okay, we're going to be able to deploy Tatum on both offense and defense in a way that's going to solve a problem for us and cause a problem for the other team. And that is something that I don't think is true for Luka when it comes to defensive end. And Shai, I want to see, like, what's the ceiling? Because, like, he's Mr. Efficiency. He's Mr. Consistency. But, like, game 6 against the Mavericks, he had 36, 3 and 8 on his usual 62% true shooting. That's great. Like, incredible, like, great game. But, like, it's not 46 on the road in Milwaukee. Like, you needed every point. It's not 51 in a game 7 against Philly. Like, his career high is 45 for Shai. And he takes a lot of 2s, not a lot of 3s. So, like, the variance, like, when Tatum's pull-up 3 is going, there's nothing that you can't stop the Celtics and you can't stop Tatum. So there's just a couple of things I'm like, can we see Shai do it at the highest level? I think we can. I'm not someone who doesn't think that Shai can do it. But it's like, we've got the proof of concept when it comes to Tatum, and it feels like that doesn't matter in some cases.
That's important context too. Like, my player rankings list was based on a criteria that did not factor in team success at all whatsoever. Like, it was very much, if we were in a vacuum doing basically a fantasy draft, snake draft style, that's for a season that starts in October, who you taking? And, like, again, like, the idea there is, like, if I take Shai and I'm building a roster around him, boom, my offense is going to be a certain level no matter what. And coming into the season, because there were some question marks surrounding Tatum, and the Team USA thing was just such a weird thing. Like, it was like they so desperately needed shooting, and he just wasn't shooting well, and so it just turned into such a disastrous kind of confluence of events for him there. And so, like, Tatum's stock was kind of at a weird low for him having won the championship. It's like there were, like, there's all this bait too, like, all this easy low-hanging fruit for detractors. It's like, well, Jaylen Brown won Finals MVP, like, Jaylen Brown won Eastern Conference Finals MVP, like, this kind of stuff. And so it just kind of felt like it was kind of snowballing a little bit during that stretch. And that was actually why I kept saying, like, everyone's writing off Tatum way too fast. Like, this dude's clearly he's obviously not 0 for 16 guy. Okay. Like, he's gonna be better. Like, this is only a matter of time. I thought that game 1 against the Knicks was so much fun. It felt like you guys are idiots for thinking I can't do this,
All right. So, yeah. And, like, I think we'll wrap it up there. We don't want to keep you for too long, Jayson. I feel like, we've injected as much Tatum propaganda probably as we can into for now, but maybe, like, we were, like, gonna maybe jump into like what I love about.
I got a few more minutes. If you guys
sure.
want to.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, like, I think, like, I think just, like, zooming out, because I know a lot of people that wanted to see this show. There are people in our Discord being like, make sure you put on your Rupert Murdoch hat and don't let you make sure you hit Jayson with all this stuff. Like, I think it's important to, like, I think a lot of people that have seen your clips that are maybe watching right now don't actually watch your show, because I saw you for the first time through the clips, and I went and watched your show, and I was like, he's ripping Luka way harder than it appears that he might be ripping Tatum on. Like, you hold everybody to account. So if anybody hasn't, I would recommend checking out Jayson's actual long form content, because it's quite good. But, like, it clearly all just comes from a place of really liking and loving basketball. Like you mentioned, becoming a better basketball player in your 30s. I know I think you coach high school basketball. I guess the question is, like, your love of basketball. Did you know that you wanted to be someone that, like, probably wanted to play in the NBA when you were in high school, and then maybe figured out at some point around then that maybe talking about basketball was more likely? But yeah, walk us through that part of your life.
So I grew up at a baseball football house. My little brother ended up playing at West Point my older brother played some JUCO football, the big baseball family. And so there just wasn't any basketball. And then that's how I ended up being a LeBron guy. Was I just happened to turn on the TV in 2006 and was watching an Eastern Conference semifinals game 7. It was the year that they lost in game 7. And I fell in love with basketball. LeBron was obviously the originating force behind that. Like, that's the thing too. And I freely admit this on the show. I'm not actually a Lakers fan. I'm a LeBron fan. And when LeBron retires, I probably won't have any sort of sentimental attachment to any player or team, which will be better for my job, to be honest. So we'll get to that when that time comes. But anyway, I fell in love with basketball, and then somehow I got tall. I have no idea what happened. No one in my family. My mom's tall, but like none of my siblings are particularly tall, and I randomly became 6'6", and I have about a 6'10" wingspan. So I was gifted with some natural basketball frame. And
that's bullshit, dude. I got a 6'4" dad, and I ended up 5'7". It's like, what's this nonsense, dude?
So anyway, I didn't start playing until I was pretty old, and so I was very, very bad at first. And like I famously got benched on senior night. Didn't play a single minute on senior night. That was like the story that I always tell. So I ended up getting into basketball at the college level in my 3rd year in college, just by walking in to play at like an open gym in JUCO, and just played really well and ended up getting a scholarship offer, and just kind of rode that to some mediocre college basketball success. But I was still super, super raw. It was nice. I got my school paid for. I had some big moments. I was really talented. Like, I had a 30-point game. I had like a half dozen 20-point games. Like, I had some good games, but I was so raw and so bad in like all of these like core areas as a player. So what was fun about that was then in my 20s, as I continued to play, I added that polish and refinement. And so like, as I got into my late 20s, early 30s, I just became a much better player. But I never had any sort of delusions of grandeur as it pertains to the NBA. I did want to play professionally overseas, though. And I was trying a couple of different things, and I ended up getting a deal with a league that was in India, believe it or not.
Okay.
And I was like loaded up. They paid me for a few weeks. We're getting ready to go, and then the league folded. And I was like, okay, well, maybe it's time for me to hang it up. So
thanks for the paycheck.
Yeah, exactly. So at that point, I was kind of in a position too financially where I was like, I need to start like progressing in that direction. And so I ended up getting a real job. And then as soon as I got the real job, I was like, I need to find something to do with the game, because I just was so obsessed with the game. And so it became something where I was basically just on Twitter talking shit and having fun. And and Jason Maples, you guys know who Jason Maples is? The Lakers guy.
Yeah.
You might have seen him. So he invited me on his show as a guest in it was like 2020, I think. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And so I did it, and immediately I was like, this is so much fun. Like, I love doing this. And so right after that, I ended up launching just a solo thing where I do like Periscope on Twitter, and then I'd take the recordings and I'd put it on a podcast feed, and it turned into kind of a hybrid thing, because I was like doing Laker post-game stuff with Raj, but then I was also doing like NBA wide stuff as like the Jason Timpf podcast, like its own separate thing. And then what actually happened was Logan Swaim, who's the head of content at The Volume, he had been following me on Twitter back in 2016 when I was talking shit. So he was a Lakers guy, and we ended up like breaking Twitter Spaces one night. Like it was during the Westbrook fiasco, if you guys remember. That was
I feel like you gotta be more specific.
Like imagine if imagine if they traded Drew Holiday and Derek White for a bad basketball player.
Oh, you
like
mean the trade night? That was like a top 7 moment in Celtics history the last kind of like 10 years, probably.
That's so funny. So yeah, anyway, they lost some bad game during the dregs of that season. It was the year they actually missed the playoffs. And we were on Twitter Spaces, which was really powerful algorithm. Like if you were in someone's Twitter space, all of your followers would get to see that Twitter space. So it was like kind of like a wildfire algorithm, which was very powerful for us. And we ended up breaking the algorithm, and then basically Logan reached out to me and was like, hey, how about we do an NBA, like a national NBA type of show? And that's kind of how it got started. But I knew I wanted to do something with the game. I wasn't sure what it was going to be. The big thing, I talked about coaching. I think that's where my heart is at. Like if I ever got an opportunity to coach basketball in a way that would be for my living, I would do it. The problem with coaching is at the college level, it's very, very like you gotta work underneath somebody for 10 years and do a bunch of clerical bullshit, like making sure kids are attending classes and all this like kind of stuff. And like, I just, what I love about what I do with the high school kids is I don't get paid, which is fine. I'm not in it for the money, but I just do basketball. I show up and I just coach the kids, and I do it in a part-time context. I work with my buddy Josh. He's one of the guys that I play in a men's league with on Sundays. He's the head coach, and then I'm one of his assistants, but I primarily focus on player development. So I do all their like skills training and stuff. And I just love it. And that's like that's the key part there. It's just really, really difficult to make a living in coaching without paying your dues. Whereas with media, it's much more of a meritocracy, and I was able to pretty quickly build an audience. And so I was able to find an opportunity without having to kind of do some of the stuff that I would have to do in coaching. And so that's kind of how I ended up in this pathway, if that makes sense.
Well, I don't know, man. The Lakers head coach is a podcast. Yeah, it's true. Yeah. There was definitely.
If your front office hires me, you are an idiot. Okay, like your front office is an idiot. Okay.
Well, our front office, look, hey, I don't know. Maybe there's Brad Stevens, Jayson Tatum need to have a meeting, but I don't know. Like, okay, so like you clearly like you're high level about the basketball and analysis. Like, it's interesting that you got into it late as a player. Like, I know advice for both me or anyone that's like wanting to just consume basketball in a different way or a deeper way, or trying to cover basketball in a deeper way. Is there something you did to help yourself learn more about how the game of basketball works?
So it's interesting. There's the basketball media was huge for me there. If I had to list the 5 people that were most influential on me as a basketball player or basketball mind, whatever you want to call it, it's a few college coaches, a couple of specific guys. I want to specifically shout out Jeff Rutter, who's currently the head coach at Arizona Christian University. He runs that NAIA. It's an NAIA program that he runs like a pro program. And I played for 3 different coaches in college because I was a JUCO transfer. And like I had good coaches. I don't want to like say that they weren't, but like Jeff was just on another level, and he taught me so much about the game in so many different layers. But like one of the big guys that like helped shape my understanding of NBA basketball was Pete Zayas from Laker Film Room. I want to shout him out because like there's an understanding of basketball that comes from playing any form of organized basketball. And then there's NBA basketball. These are the best players in the world. And there's so many things about the way that NBA teams operate on both ends of the floor that I learned just by listening to smart people. And, it's one of those things where I think there's like this hesitance from a lot of people to admit that sort of thing, like that you can learn from somebody else in the space. And that's the thing. I don't listen to as much basketball media as I used to, just because I do it all day, every day, and I need a break every once in a while. And so like I do a lot of like, I listen to fiction, or I'll listen to Grateful Dead, something like that, just to get my mind off of what I'm doing.
Watch some Star Wars. I can see back there as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But every once in a while, like I still will listen to these basketball minds, and that's why I get on Twitter and I consume your guys' work, and I look at all these people that are covering the league, because I just learn. Like there's a guy named John who covers John Jablonko, who covers the Heat. I follow him. I just learn about the Heat from him, and I learn about different. Like I think that it's important to expose yourself to as many smart basketball minds as you can. Just get them in your ear, because here's the thing: you might listen to them and you might get almost nothing out of it, but you might get 1 or 2 things that linger with you for a certain amount of time, and that might affect your worldview. And I think I think it's more important to be communal in that regard, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
I have one really quick, Jake,
Okay.
that anyone can do. Don't watch the ball. Try and watch the entire court if you can. It's really weird to get used to at first, but like try not to just focus on the ball, and then you will start to see all this other shit that is happening that you were never paying attention to before. And trying to do that has like helped me personally quite a bit.
It's probably why you don't like Anthony Edwards that much. I'm just...
Whoa.
I will say to that point, like one of the things that's really helped me with the volume is watching less games live and watching more of them the next day.
Yes.
Because when you watch games live, you get caught up in the drama. You get caught up in the like, who's going to win this game. and it's easier to get distracted when you can't pause, play, rewind, that kind of thing. When I can watch a game and pour over each possession for a good 10, 15 seconds that I need to, and quickly disregard possessions that are obvious flukes, like there's nothing to analyze about a bad transition defense possession where a guy gets an easy dunk. It's like they just play bad transition defense. They've had the same principles at high school, get the rim, get the ball, get the rim, spray out the shooters. I try to like key in on specific sequences, specific parts of games. I'm big on like runs. I think games are determined in specific stretches. Like for instance, that Thunder Cavs game last night, it was that stretch where they kept hedging with Hartenstein and Garland just kept throwing it over the top, and then they eventually switched it. Then Allen got an offensive rebound. Like that dynamic was what shaped that game, And so I think that to your point, Wayne, like it's easier to get off the ball and to look at all those details when you're not watching live sometimes.
Oh man, that's funny because I hate knowing the scores of games because I'm like I'm like just inject the emotion right into me. So that's actually really good because like I'm trying to always get better. So I like that tip. I'm not on the edge of my seat, like living and dying with every.
I know when we do the playback, Jake, I'm like, different. I have no fucking idea what happened during that game.
Doing the shows after playoff games are like particularly difficult because I'm like,
we played good.
So I did post game shows with the Lakers, and so I'm familiar with the feeling. And what was kind of nice about that is like the angle is always the Lakers angle. You're like when they lose, you kind of harp on the same 5 or 6 flaws. When they win, you kind of harp on the same 5 or 6 strengths. Doing a national pod instant reaction games after is so crazy because like you'll have these notes and then like whoever wins is who you're focusing on. So like the entire dynamic of the show shifts on like a couple of possessions. And then there's like these crazy sequences where it's like, all right, Jamal Murray just hit a game winner. All right, let's go. Let's do it. We're doing this.
Twice.
So that part is fun. Yeah, exactly. Twice. Yeah. Once to end the season. So anyway.
That bastard. Yeah. Man, it's a good ride. Jayson, look, man, you've been like really generous with your time. Everybody, again, Hoops Tonight. Really great show. He doesn't hate the Celtics or Jayson Tatum as much as most of you think that some of you think that he does. But yeah, man, really appreciate it. And maybe we'll have to do a check-in come conference finals or something like that later down.
Wayne, it was good to meet you, man. Jake, it was
really
good
nice
to meet you in this format. Let's
you.
Absolutely do this again later in the season.
Sure.
Hell yeah. Everybody in the chat, we'll see you tomorrow. We'll be, again, streaming live the Sacramento Kings game. The boys are healthy. It is going to be the 3rd game this season. I think we have all of the starters available. So we'll be back tomorrow night. Until next time, go Celtics.